Thank you. So welcome to the Food Equity Fund info session. Our goal today is to walk through the application process and eligibility requirements and what to expect. We will also give examples of a strong application. The presentation will be about 30 minutes and we'll stop the recording and then have the rest of the time to answer any of your questions. Next slide, please. Next slide. So what do we fund? As you may know, the sweetened beverage tax is what makes the Food Equity Fund possible. The fund was created by the Community Advisory Board, who is responsible for making recommendations to the city on how this tax should be spent. And the intent of this fund is to specifically invest in community food work led by Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants, refugees, people with low incomes, youth, and/or elders. Next slide, please. Some eligible projects. All eligible projects must have the following items. The project activities must occur within Seattle. It must be accessible and benefit people who live, learn, work, and/or worship in Seattle. There must be a focus on contributing to an equitable and sustainable local food system, which we'll talk about shortly. And it also must be completed within 24 months of contracting. Next slide. So here's a great visual about the food system that we like to use. As you can see, we know that food is deeply interconnected and it's not linear. And we know groups here today focus maybe at multiple areas of the food system. But we hope that this demonstrates that we can fund anything within the food system. So this includes growing food, harvesting food, preparing and eating food together, distributing food, and/or managing food waste. Next slide, please. So here are some great examples of eligible activities. It's not comprehensive, but some examples include expanding your urban garden to grow more culturally relevant food. It could include a food pantry distribution, teaching and learning about food and your cultural traditions. It's important to know that we also fund physical improvements. So this can include a new irrigation system or greenhouse or commercial kitchen. There's lots of possibilities of what we're able to fund. Next slide, please. But we do have some very clear funding restrictions. Here are some expenses that we are not able to pay for through this grant program. And I just want to highlight a few, especially ones that come up often in the application process. We are not able to fund gift cards or food vouchers. We're also not able to fund any for-profit activities. So if you are having a fundraiser, we're not able to support that. We can fund overhead costs, but they have to be related to the Food Equity Fund project. And no scholarships and no physical improvements on a private residency. If you have any questions about any of our funding restrictions, please feel free to contact us directly, which we'll share more information soon to be able to answer questions about your eligible activities. Next slide, please. There are also a few applicants that we are not able to fund. For example, we're not able to fund an individual person. We're not able to fund political groups or 501c4 groups. This one comes up often for us. We're not able to, at this time, fund for-profit entities. So this includes small businesses or restaurants. We're not able to fund major institutions such as community colleges, school districts, universities, or hospitals. And we're not able to fund applicants that have failed to successfully carry out an awarded Food Equity Fund project in the past 3 years. And again, you can contact us directly if you have questions about your eligibility. Next slide, please. But who should apply? This is pretty self-explanatory. Organizations that have a 501c3 nonprofit status can apply, or community groups that have a fiscal sponsor with a 501c3 nonprofit status. And if you're a community group and you don't know what a fiscal sponsor is or need help identifying a fiscal sponsor, you can also reach out to us and we'll do our best to support. We also encourage tribes and tribal organizations to apply. Next slide, please. So here are all the important dates for our 2025 cycle. Applications, the most important date, I would say, is that applications are due by 11:59 p.m. On March 17th. We highly recommend that applicants do not wait until the last minute to apply. And in fairness to others, we will not be accepting any late applications. And that includes, unfortunately, applications submitted at 12:01 a.m. Please note that staff is not available after business hours on the 17th to help with any technical assistance. After applications are turned in, we have an extensive community review process. We will have a community review panel made up of local leaders with expertise in racial equity, food justice, and health inequities. And we aim to have decisions to all applicants by June 30th. But if for whatever reason we cannot meet that timeline, we will be sure to be notifying you via email. Now, to dig into the specific components of the application process, I will pass it to my colleague, Alin.
Thank you. And next, thank you. We're on the right slide. The next few slides will take you step by step on how to apply. It contains links where you can find the application and contact information. Step 1, download and read the guidelines. The link should be in the chat. It contains useful information and examples on how to help you write a strong application. This is our main phone number and general email. This is the best way to reach us if you have questions and would like additional support. After this presentation, our project manager will email you to follow up to see how we can assist you. Next slide, please. Step 2, to apply, you will need to download the forms from our webpage. They include the application form, which has the cover sheet, narrative questions, work plan, and leadership bios in one form. In addition, there's an Excel spreadsheet of a grant request template. Please note that these forms may look familiar, but they are new for 2025. Please do not use old forms. Even if you're a returning applicant and your budget is the same, please do not use the old budget template. You will also see the scoring rubric, and one of my coworkers will go into that in more depth, but it allows you to see exactly how your application will be viewed by the community review panel. Next slide, please. Step 3, we also offer technical assistance as well as feedback on your draft application. This is optional, but if you want us to review a draft of your application, please turn this in to us by no later than close of business March 5th. We recommend applicants submit as much completed materials as possible so we can provide the most comprehensive feedback. Project managers will not be part of the decision-making process, but they can help you develop a stronger application. Next slide, please. Lastly, to officially apply, applicants must email all required application forms and any additional materials to foodequityfund@seattle.gov, no later than 11:59 p.m. on Monday, March 17th. Use the subject line, final submission, underline with your organization name. And you're probably going to hear us repeat this deadline over and over and over again, because we want you to be timely, but we also want to honor the work that you and your community are doing to put the application together. And again, in fairness to others, late applications will not be accepted or considered. Next slide, please. There are a lot of ways to receive assistance during the application process. We have information sessions like you're in right now. This is our second one. We have in-language support. We know that people can do a better job if they have things explained to them in the language which they're most accustomed to hearing. You will have to submit it in English, but you can still get support in understanding the process and in completing your application in the language that is most comfortable for you. We're going to have a virtual Q&A office hours. That will be Thursday, the 6th of March, between 4:30 and 6 o'clock p.m. You can join us by phone. The number is there, as well as the access code. The kind of things that project managers can help you with are, for example, to help you determine which activities are eligible, which expenses are eligible. They can assist you with any property ownership questions. This is especially helpful if your project involves property that your organization does not own. And even if the city owns it, it's usually controlled by a department, and we can put you in contact with those people, that person, so that you can make sure that they are in support of what you'd like to do. We can help you in your search for a fiscal sponsor. Some of your applicants will already be your own fiscal sponsor, some will not. But a fiscal sponsor is going to be required for you to contract with the city and receive reimbursements. So we can help you locate some fiscal sponsors that might align with your work, and you can work with them directly to see if they're a good partner for you. We can also explain the valuation criteria. And as I said, my colleague will go through that in more detail, but sometimes it's just a simple matter of understanding what we're looking for so that you can write the strongest application. And again, we can review your draft application if you email us the materials no later than March 5th. And while 2 weeks out seems a lot of time, we need time to review the application, give you our best advice, and then you need time to implement it as well. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over now to my able colleague, Lorna, who's going to really give you the nitty-gritty on how to move forward.
Thanks so much, Elaine. So this is the application form. This is the first part of the application. To the left is what it looks like. This is where we capture key information, including contact and group information. Do double check your email and phone number. Sometimes we may need to contact you if there are any issues with your application. Make sure the funding amount matches your grant requests, and let us know how long the project will be and which Seattle location and neighborhoods your project activities will take place. Some projects may be citywide, so then you can put citywide. In question number 4, under short project description, you have about 3 to 4 sentences to summarize the main components of your project. You will have an opportunity to expand on this in the narrative questions. Next slide, please. So the next part of the application is the narrative questions, and this is what it looks like. A few things to consider as you prepare to answer these questions. There are 7 questions. Double check to make sure that you answer all 7. Use size 12 Calibri font. And the questions are divided into 3 parts: people, project or proposal, and impact. We do not use word counts, so answer all the questions in 6 pages or less. But if your narrative questions and answers are more than 6 pages, you run the risk of your application not being reviewed. We do recommend answering the questions in order, as it makes scoring easier. Also, being clear is more important than the length of your answers. So you can use bullet points or paragraphs. Now let's go through how your application will be reviewed and evaluated. Next slide, please. Evaluation criteria. So once you have submitted your application and considered eligible, your proposals will be reviewed by a community review panel. The panel will be using a set of criteria in how they evaluate each application. There are 2 places to find this evaluation criteria. At first, it's in the guidelines, pages 12 to 13, or you can visit our website to download the full scoring rubric. The community review panel will use this evaluation criteria in creating their recommended list of projects to fund. Next slide, please. So we want to make sure that you're able to find our scoring rubric. It's on our website. You need to scroll down to the application materials and click and download the scoring rubric separately. Now we will walk you through a few of the narrative questions to show you how they will be evaluated. We will give you an example of an answer that may need further development and suggestions of things to consider. Next slide, please. So here is under people, question number 3, and it asks, what community are you a part of? How are they engaged throughout your proposed work? In your response, you may also include any existing partnerships and the role they play in your proposed work. So here are things to consider for a strong application. You need to clearly define the community you are a part of, include specific neighborhoods and/or demographics, include if the priority communities are key decision makers. Priority community is defined as Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants and refugees, people with low incomes, youth, or elders. Also include the level of their involvement in the phases of your proposed work. And is this project originated, designed, led by, and benefits the priority communities? If partnerships are included, specify if this is an ongoing partnership or a new partnership that is mutually beneficial. So an example of a developing answer is, we are providing culturally relevant weekly meals to seniors in North Seattle. We'll also work with Organization A and B to provide produce boxes once a month. If we are working with you, here are some questions we would have. Please expand or provide more specificity on the community you are a part of. You mentioned seniors. Which neighborhoods are they coming from? Or what is their demographic makeup? How are they involved in your project besides receiving more meals and food boxes? Are they also part of the decision making? Do they help shape and design or give feedback to improve the programming? You mentioned partners. Is this a new partnership? And are your partners included in your budget? Next slide, please. Another example under proposal, question number 4, it asks, what will you do with the Food Equity Fund grant? Here are things to consider for a strong application. Have a project description that is clear, specific, and actionable. The project is consistent with the fund's purpose of community-led work that contributes to an equitable and sustainable local food system in Seattle. The project aligns with the work plan and the grant request budget. An example of a developing answer is, we will provide culturally relevant weekly meals and a box of produce to 90 seniors for a year. This answer is almost there. It speaks to what you're going to do and who you are going to provide meals to and how often. What about the where and the how? The questions we have are, where are you sourcing your food and produce? What kind of culturally relevant meals? Will the food be picked up, delivered, served on site? Where in North Seattle? Is there a particular neighborhood or a priority community you are focusing on? So make sure you answer the who, the what, the where, the when, and the how of your project. Keep in mind, your answer will need to align with the work plan and budget. Next slide, please. So here's a last example. This is impact question number 6, and it asks, how do you define success for your project, and how will you know your efforts were successful? So a strong application will define what a successful project means to your group or organization. Is it clearly tied to a meaningful and specific community benefit for those who experience the most food and health disparities? How will you measure whether your project was successful or needs improvement? Are your ways or methods clear and doable? Here's an example of a developing answer. We define success by being able to provide 90 low-income families and seniors on a fixed income, nutritious and culturally familiar foods. This is a good start, since it's specific to a community experiencing food and health disparity, and the benefits are having nutritious and culturally relevant meals. So some questions we may have. What are your ways of knowing that your community is benefiting? How do you know the type of food they want? Do you collect feedback? How? Is it through surveys? Is it in-person conversations? This is just one example. You may have other examples of community benefits. For example, like did you deepen or increase partnerships with local farmers and businesses? So these are some of the project examples that we wanted to share with you, and we hope that these were useful. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Next slide, please. So in summary, do use the evaluation criteria in the guidelines on pages 12 and 13, or the scoring rubric found on our webpage as a reference to inform your answers. Do provide concrete examples specific to your work and your organization. The community reviewers will use your narrative answers in their discussions. So the more concrete the examples, the specific details, it'll help them get a clear picture of who you are, what you're doing, and why. Make sure that the project description and the narrative are aligned with the work plan, the budget, and the leadership and team members directly involved in your project, and that is actionable and it's feasible or doable. So now to cover the rest of the application is Chien.
Thank you, Lorna. So in your application, after the narrative questions, the next section is the work plan. What we are looking for here is what are the 5 to 8 high-level milestones for your projects. It is important to know that by high level, we mean major milestones. So you don't need to include tasks like creating an outreach flyer, but include that you will outreach to 50 new families for a free produce bag at your senior center. So your milestones should be clear, specific, and actionable. Also, all your project milestones should be related and build on each other. Your goal here is to make it easy for community reviewers to follow and understand how you plan to carry out your project. When do you plan to do these milestones? How will you complete the milestone? And is the time frame you have allotted to complete each milestone realistic? Community reviewers will also look to see if your milestone align with your project narratives and budget. So here is a good example of a milestone for a food distribution project. Identify up to 50 elders to participate in monthly grocery bag distribution. This is a very clear and specific milestone because it tells you the number of elderly people they will reach and how often is the food distribution program. It also tells you how they will accomplish the milestone. They will accomplish the milestone by working with existing families and do one-on-one outreach at Community Center A. And when will this happen and for how long? They will start this in October and finish by December 2025. While our grant is for up to 24 months, please do not feel pressure to stretch your timeline to 24 months. It can be 12 months, 18 months, whatever makes the most sense for your project. Next slide, please. After the work plan is the leadership bio. What community reviewers are looking for here is, are your team member and key leaders working on this project reflect the lived experiences of the community they work with? This including the lived work and or volunteer experiences, cultural expertise, and or education that demonstrates the connection with the proposed project's community or neighborhoods. So here's the example of project team members bio. Jan Doe. Her role in this project is doing community outreach, then you'll want to share her experience in that role. So here it shows that she's a West Seattle resident for more than 10 years. She has 5 years of case management experience connecting immigrant refugee families, accessing local resources. She also has 3 years volunteer experience for ABC Senior Center, helping with bilingual social media posts and flyer distribution. Next slide, please. Grant request budget is a separate attachment to the application, and it is in Microsoft Excel format. Please make sure you do download and use the 2025 Excel budget form, as we have made some formatting changes to the form. For your grant request budget, you should only include expenses that will be paid for by the Food Equity Fund dollars. The maximum amount you can be awarded is $100,000. Therefore, this budget shouldn't exceed $100,000. Community reviewer will be looking for the following. Is the budget feasible? Does it align with the attached work plan and narrative? If your budget doesn't capture the full picture of your proposal, or if there are areas of your budget you feel like you want to explain a little bit more, please use the budget narrative section to explain further. This section is optional, but maybe the Food Equity Fund is only funding a portion of your project and you are getting all of your food donated. The budget narrative section is where you can explain it. And let's quickly go over the 4 categories of the budget. You may or may not have expenditure in every category. Personnel. This category is pretty self-explanatory. Use this section to include all staffing costs related to the project. Professional services. Complete this section if you plan to hire independent contractor or consultant who will provide more short-term services to the project. Fiscal sponsorship fee is one example. Other examples of services are contractor or facilitators. Supply and materials. Any products that you want to purchase will typically go into this section. For example, food, gardening tools, seeds, food container, etc. Capital expenses. You will only use this category if you are building something that is staying permanently. If that is the case, you are required to include a 15% contingency for all construction-related costs. Sometimes during the actual construction, things may happen that you don't anticipate. For example, design changes or design errors, material price fluctuation, permit fee, things like that. So when you include a 15% contingency in your budget, you will have the resources to cover any unanticipated costs. Next slide, please. After you have finished the application and the grant request budget form, there are a few other things that may apply to you and you will complete the application. If you are a 501c3 organization, you should have a letter from the IRS. If you're not able to obtain the determination letter from IRS, copy of your organization's most recent 990 filing will also be sufficient. Most recent means within the last 3 years. If you're not sure where to locate these documents, you may want to check out the IRS online database search tool. My colleague will copy and paste the link in the chat for you, which allow you to search for an organization's tax-exempt status and 990 filing. If you do not have a 501c3 status, you will need to have a fiscal sponsor with a 501c3 status. The fiscal sponsor is the organization that assumes financial responsibility for the project. They will submit your request for reimbursement and will receive payment from the city. Fiscal sponsor typically charge a fee in the range of 10 to 12% of the grant amount. If you already have one, great. Please include your existing agreement with your fiscal sponsor with your application. Or if you have identified one, please include their contact information, address, phone number, and email address in the application cover page. Next slide, please. Property owner permission. Whether or not you will need a property owner permission is a key question. Please check out page 6 of the guideline. In general, if you are building on or making improvement to a piece of property that your organization does not own, you will need a written permission from the property owner at the time of the application. This including both public and private property. Projects that will occur on city property will be reviewed by the appropriate city department once a final application has been submitted. If you have physical improvement project, we highly encourage you to work with the Food Equity Fund staff early in the application process. So let's look at a few examples. Building a greenhouse or building a new garden bed will need a property owner permission with your application. However, confirming the location for a conference is something that can be done within the contract period, as any number of locations might be appropriate. It does not have to be confirmed at the time of the application. Next slide, please. What to expect if awarded? If funded, organization and or physical sponsor will be required to attend an orientation, finalize project outcome and sign a contract with the city, have a current City of Seattle business license at the time of contracting, commercial general liability insurance, which you will have to secure and provide evidence of that. This is not an event insurance. This is a liability coverage that is provided at the time of contracting and must be active throughout the length of a contract, and adding City of Seattle as additional insured. And if your proposal will work with the youth under age of 18, we may ask for proof of background check of everyone, including volunteers that will be working with the youth. You can also include the background check expenses in your budget. And then if you are doing design and capital project, you must follow federal law to provide readily accessible facilities. If this requirement is applicable to you, especially if the improvement is on city property, we can refer you to the appropriate staff for guidance. Next slide, please. So here's a quick summary of a complete application. A completed application including the following. Your organization's basic info, the cover page, the 7 narrative question, work plan, and the leadership bio, the Excel grant request budget, and IRS determination letter or fiscal sponsor info, and any additional materials such as the property owner permission letter if applicable to your proposal. Next slide, please. And here is the Food Equity Fund staff team and their email addresses. I'm now gonna turn it over to Lisa Chen to facilitate the question and answering section.
Thank you, Jian. Miriam, if we can stop the recording at this time and stop sharing the PowerPoint. I'm going to first take the questions that were in the chat. And while Miriam is doing that, I will say the question and answer it. Audrey Fine asks, if we are a current Food Equity Fund grant, can we apply to this round for